Greetings from Wyoming. OSY Guy here, and this is my tutorial on recovering data from a Windows computer using Ubuntu. I am a computer technician, and I certainly run across a number of customers who come to me with a Windows computer that has become either completely unbootable or boots up very slowly and performs very badly. And sometimes it's just due to a Windows update that comes in that doesn't come in correctly, and so it's misconfigured, and you can't get to a login screen. In some cases, I've even seen the computer go into this automatic system repair where it pops up and says, we need to try to automatically fix your computer, and you can select OK, and then it goes through that process and eventually comes up and says, I can't fix this problem, and so then you reboot the computer and then it starts all over again. It's in an infinite loop. So typically when Windows computers are behaving in this fashion, you're not talking about lost data. The data is still intact, and you just simply can't access it from Windows. Now, in the past, it just seemed to me that the only option I really had would be to take out the installation media for Windows and do a clean install and just do a start over. That seems to be the most effective solution. But of course, if you do a clean install, you're going to be throwing away your data. So what I'm talking about here is how to recover that data before you do a clean install. What I want to use is a substitute operating system. In this particular case, Ubuntu Gnome, placed on a flash drive, and turn that into a bootable flash drive that we can use as a temporary system so that we can access the data files. So we need to have that ISO file for your favorite distribution. My particular favorite distribution, as you can see, is Ubuntu Gnome, and so download your favorite distribution. It could be just regular standard Ubuntu. It could be Fedora, for that matter. Just want to make sure that we have a GNOME desktop environment, because that environment has the particular utility called disks, which is what I'm going to be demonstrating here. You'll need to also have a USB flash drive that we'll use to place the Ubuntu Gnome operating system onto that as a live USB flash drive, and then we'll also need to have an external USB hard drive that we'll be using for backing up the user data. To prepare a flash drive, it's a pretty simple process. We'll want to open up the file manager, and we're assuming here that you have downloaded the ISO file that we're talking about. So in this particular case, it's Ubuntu Gnome 16.10.iso. The easy way to prepare this and place this ISO file on a USB flash drive is to right-click on the ISO file, and the very first time that you do this, you'll want to select Open with Other Application, because the default will not be Open with Disk Image Writer. So select the Open with Other Application first. The default will be, I can't remember if it's either Archive Mounter or Archive Manager that's the default, but choose instead the one that's called Disk Image Writer, and select that. In this section, we are seeing the disks utility, and this is a module inside the disks utility that's called the image writer, and you're going to be looking for your flash drive. In my case, it's this Jet Flash Transcend, so I select that, and then I just simply select Start Restoring and then click on Restore. As I go through that process, that will create this bootable Ubuntu Gnome flash drive. If you want to do this from Windows instead, then one utility that you might want to try is a utility called Rufus. After you've created the drive, we need to plug that drive into the Windows computer that is having trouble. And as we start up the computer, we're looking to see if we can trigger what I call the boot menu here. And that trigger is not consistent among many different manufacturers of computers. So as an example, most Dell computers have the boot menu trigger as the F12 key. It seems like on a lot of HPs it's the F9 key. My System 76 laptops use the F7 key. If you're not too sure and you want to not just try to guess at it, you might do a web search for the computer model of your computer and then look for boot menu, and you might be able to very easily find out what the trigger key is for that. When you successfully get that boot menu to show up, then you'll see like maybe about 4 options: boot to the hard drive, boot to the DVD-ROM drive, and there should also be an option that is described as USB device, USB storage, something like that. You'll want to choose USB and press the enter key, and that should take you right into, in my case, Ubuntu Gnome, the live edition. If that USB option doesn't work, then you may be dealing with a computer that has set up in BIOS an option that's called Secure Boot, and so you may have to reboot the computer again. And the most common way to trigger your BIOS settings is to press the F2 key at startup. Sometimes that's different, but that's the most standard one that's out there. And rummage through your boots or your BIOS settings and look for Secure Boot and make sure it is set to be disabled. After you do that, then reboot the computer again, try your boot menu trigger, and that should take you into Ubuntu Gnome if that's what you're using. Now, you may see when the computer gets up and running in this substitute operating system, you might see a couple of options: the try option and the install option. Obviously, we don't want to do the install because all we want to do is just get access to the data on that computer. So the try option is the one that you're looking for. Once you've done that, you'll want to try to access your Windows partition with the Files Manager. Now, I'm not in a live bootable flash drive version of Ubuntu, so we're just going to pretend here that we're in that live version. Hit your logo key and then go into the section over here where you can see your Files Manager showing up. It's going to look like a file cabinet. Click on that, and then you're going to look down the left-hand side here to see if you can spot your Windows partition. In this particular case, I have a Windows hard drive hooked up here, and it's just simply called 500 gigabyte volume. And if I click on that, I just went right into it, and of course I can tell that I'm in a Windows installation because I've got program files x86, users, and Windows. So that's obviously a Windows installation there. If you don't happen to see your Windows installation going down the left side here, then click on Other Locations and look up here to see if you can see any other options. Oftentimes I've seen a Windows hard drive identified as OS, and so you can click on that and get access that way. Now we just got in successfully into our Windows hard drive there, but that is not necessarily always the case. If you get an error message instead, you might see one that looks like this. It will say unable to access Windows, talking about an unclean file system. Basically, it looks to the file manager as if Windows has not been shut down properly. It's marked in an unsafe state, and you get this small clue down here that says that this needs to be opened up as an RO or read-only mount option. And so basically what we want to do is step around this error and get access to our files. And so the way that we're going to do that is going to be to use the disks utility. The disks utility is going to be accessible in your live session. You just press the logo key and then type in the word disks, and this will be the response. We're going to be looking for the Windows hard drive down this list, and so in my case, this is the one that we're talking about. And it is typically the case that you will have a Windows hard drive that will have 3 or 4 partitions, and we only want to access the main data partition. That will be the largest partition, and so you'll want to select, in this case, this particular partition. It says 500 gigabyte NTFS. And then we're going to I'm going to have you click on the gears icon and select Edit Mount Options. We're going to change the mount options to read RO for read only, and so let me just show you what those screenshots look like here. In this particular case, I had a 750 gigabyte hard drive. I selected the largest partition here. And then I clicked on the gears icon, and we selected mount options, and this is the screen. This is the way the screen looks, and it looks like you can do nothing in here. The only thing you can do is turn off the switch up here that says automatic mount options. So click that to have it go to the off position. When that happens, then you are going to see this particular section right here is what we want to make a change to. It isn't described by anything at the beginning of the dialog box there, but we just want to click in at the end of that and type in comma RO for read only, and so it'll look like this. And then you just click OK, and then you're set to go. So now there should be no problem with having that hard drive be available. So again, now you're going to open up your files manager and focus in on the hard drive that has Windows on it. And we're wanting to get the user data. So I'm going to go to Users, and I'm going to look for the user in question. And so here's my folder, so I'll double click that. And those are the data files, and we want to grab some of those and copy them over to our backup hard drive. Now, once I've gotten access to this Windows folder, I'm going to plug in my backup hard drive. In this case, it is this one that's called My Passport. And so what I like to do is have that one show up on the right screen. So I'm going to right click on My Passport and say open in a new window. So it looks like this. And so the metaphor that I use here is that the left side is my original data, and the right side will be the backup place where I'm going to store the data. So I'm going to right click on the right side over here and say new folder. We'll create a new user called Joe Customer, and then I will focus in on Joe Customer over there. And then on this side where the data is, I'm going to select desktop, And then I'm going to now hold down the control key to select the other folders here. So I'll control click Documents, Downloads, Favorites, Music, Pictures, and Videos. I'm just going to use the keyboard copy command, so I'll do Control C and then come over to my destination or my backup and use Control V to paste. And so all those items will start coming in. While we're waiting for that, here's just the quick comments on what I just did there. Now, the user's data is not necessarily complete just by getting these particular folders backed up. So I'm just mentioning a couple of extra items here that you may have to look for. If my customer is using Outlook, then I'm going to need to find the Outlook.pst file. It might not say Outlook at the beginning of it, but it will end in .pst. And also, I'm just mentioning here that I have a number of customers that will be using QuickBooks, and so we need to look for the .qbw file as well, and those are located in some different places. So let me just come back over here, and we'll take a look at Outlook, which is often in the app data folder of the user. So if we go to app data, typically it's in the local folder, and then you're looking for Microsoft, and then in here you might find a folder that says Outlook, and if you open that up, typically you're going to find the user's .pst file located in there. Now, as far as the accessing QuickBooks data files, they are often not inside the users folder. They are inside the public users folder. So you have to go to public and then go to documents, and then you'll find in here that there is there will be a folder called Intuit, and that's the one that you'll want to back up over as well over to the backup portion of your screen. There's also one other thing that I will sometimes chase down. I'll look for a folder out here that's called drivers, or in the case of HP, sometimes it's called SW setup, standing for software setup. Those contain the driver files for Windows, and so I will sometimes look for those right on the root directory of the Windows hard drive. It's if you're in Windows, it's called the C drive, but when you're not in Windows, it's not identified by the C designation. But you may want to grab those driver files as well. Now, there's just one final cleanup to do, and that's because of a characteristic that's in Windows. There is a set of files that are called desktop.ini. Those are hidden files when you're in Windows, but when you're in Linux, it doesn't recognize those desktop.ini files as hidden files, and so it copies those, and it will turn them into not hidden files, and they will actually just turn into garbage files, because every time you have a running Windows computer, it will create its own desktop.ini files in the background, and so we'll want to throw away the desktop.ini files that we just got a hold of. And there's also, in some cases, there is a thumbs.db files that we may need to look for. That usually happens in older versions of Windows, like in Windows Vista. Let's look for the desktop.ini files in my backup. So I'm going to close the window where I was looking at the originals, the original data, and we're just going to go over to our backup and click the search icon and look for desktop.ini. And we found these 9 files here, and so I always just select those and delete those, and then maybe go to the trash and make sure that the trash can has been emptied. So that was just a very quick way to clean up the data that I had on Joe Customer. And I don't have any thumbs.db files in there, but I would do a search for that, especially on older computers as well. Once that cleanup has been done, you have a hard drive that has your backup data on it, and so you can go back to your you can basically restart the Windows computer, stick in your Windows installation media, install from scratch, make it a clean install, and then bring over all of your data and just copy and paste the data into the proper spots for your new Windows installation, and then you're good to go. I have in the past had some problems with the installation of Windows, and I've tried in the past to use maybe the drivers folder that I tried to preserve, or the SW setup that I tried to preserve. Sometimes that doesn't work, and so in some cases I found this to be a really good answer to simply after installing Windows and having created the user account and so on, I will boot back into Ubuntu, and I will go and download all the Windows drivers in the Ubuntu interface, and I'll create a drivers folder on the C drive of the Windows partition, and then use Firefox to go grab all those drivers. Now there's just one setting that I do in Firefox, so I just need to have you see that. If you go to Preferences in Firefox, you need to make sure that the Download section is marked to always ask me where to save the files. Once you have done that, then when you start to download, for instance, the video driver, it says, where do you want to put this? And you go find the drivers folder that you created on your Windows drive, and then I always create a subfolder called video in that case, and place that driver there. Same thing with the audio driver, same thing with the chipset driver. So I just use this second session to boot into Ubuntu to grab all those drivers, because Ubuntu seems to always be very healthy, and all the drivers are instantly in place, and so you can access the internet with no problem. Whereas if you're back over in Windows 7 and the network driver is not in place, then you can't use your Windows session to go grab those drivers. You have to do it in some other way. So that was my easy way to get around that, to just use a second boot into Ubuntu. So that's how I use Ubuntu to rescue data off of Windows computers. Thanks for watching, and this is April 6th, and so we're getting really close to the Ubuntu Gnome 17.04 release, and so I'll review that as soon as I can, and hopefully you'll catch that video somewhere near in the future. Thanks for watching.